Okay, good morning, everyone. Today's daf is daf nun daled. We left off yesterday on daf nun gimel and beis, and we're going to be 4 lines up from the bottom. So what we were dealing with there was that in the Mishnah we had a machlokus between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanna Kama held that if someone has relations with his mother, that person is liable for 2 lavim, for two isurei lav. What are they? First of all, because it's his mother, and second of all, because it is the wife of his father. We also talked about the fact that it could, as Tosas mentioned yesterday, it could also be Eish Ish. But in any event, that the Tanna Kama holds that they're chayav for both for the father and for both he's chayav for both over there, the father's wife and the mother. And the Rabbi Yehuda held that he's only chayav for the mother. We spent time yesterday trying to figure out what's Rabbi Yehuda's source. So the first source that we tried to bring was Abaye, and actually we have it here. But in other words, Abaye tried to bring it from the pasuk in Vayikra Yud Ches, where it says Imcha Hi, it is your mother, to say that you're only liable for Imcha. What happened? That we rejected that for 2 reasons. The Gemara asked two kashas on that. The Gemara's first kasha was that if that's true, that Imcha Hi tells you that it's just your mother and not your father's wife, then similarly you should darshan the pasuk that says Erva Savicha, who that we say in Vayikra Yud Ches Ches, which is so that therefore, if so, Erva Savicha should tell you that Erva Savicha should tell you also that you're chayav only for your father's wife, but not for the mother, which would produce this strange result, as the Gemara mentioned yesterday, that you would have a man who has relations with his mother who's not his father's wife is chayav, or with his father's wife who's not his mother is chayav. But if it was his mother who was also his father's wife, then he wouldn't be chayav. That would be a bizarre result. That was question number 1. And question number 2 was, if Imcha Hi is a valid limud to tell you that someone is only chayav for relations with their mother, but not for their father's wife, then why would the Rabbanan would have to deal with that pasuk, and they should produce the same result, and they should say, like Rabbi Yehuda, that someone is chayav only for their mother, but not for Eishes Avicha. So we rejected that answer. The Gemara is actually going to go back to that answer to say that it's Imcha Hi, but we're going to do it in a way that answers those 2 questions. So what is that? Amar Rava. Rava says, Kasava Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that he's chayav only for relations with his mother comes from the pasuk as follows: Erva Savicha. So that's this pasuk. But what's different now is that we've generally understood Erva Savicha lo segala, that a person should not have relations with his father. What Rava is saying, that Rabbi Yehuda holds that those words, Erva Savicha, and we're going to see in today's daf how he learns this, but Erva Savicha is a reference to the wife of the father, whether it's his mother or not. So this is Eishes Avicha. And then, so the Gemara says, Eishes Avicha, Umaisi lo b'gzer shava. We're going to see soon, Gzer shava, how does he know that Erva Savicha is a reference to the father's wife? Umashma bein Eishes Aviv shehi imo, bein Eishes Aviv she'eno imo. So in other words, it seems to imply that regardless of whether or not it's his mother, this is the wife of his father, right? So that's how you know wife of the father. And then, Imo she'eno Eishes Aviv minayin. What happens for his mother who was not the husband of his father, i.e. that this child was born, the child who had relations with his mother was born out of wedlock? Talmud Lomar Ervas Imcha lo segala. So that's the second part of the pasuk. So we say that's how we know his mother who was not married to his father. Then the pasuk continues Imcha Hi. And the way we're understanding now is Mishum Imo Ata Mechayva V'Yata Mechayva Mishum Eishes Aviv, that he's only chayav for his mother, not for the wife of his father. So what do we have? We have the first pasuk. The way that we're understanding is that Erva Savicha is a reference to father's wife, whether his mother or not. Ervas imcha lo sigala is a reference to his mother, whether married or not. And imcha he then comes back and modifies ervas avicha. So we were saying ervas avicha includes whether it's his mother or not, and now we're saying no. The part that it says even if it's his mother, that we're knocking out, because imcha he knocks out the part that says it's his mother and tells you that if we're dealing in a case where it is both the wife of the father and his mother, he's only chayav for imchahi. Okay, so how does this answer the two questions we had yesterday when we tried using imchahi? The first question was, you produce. In other words, if you say that imchahi tells you your mother and not the wife of your father, the Gemara asked and said, ervas avichahu should tell you the opposite, that it's the wife of your father, but not your mother, so that you would produce this strange result that if it was his mother and the wife of his father, he would be pater. So we say no. Now it's not a problem, because once you understand that ervas avicha is a reference to the wife of the father, right? So now you have wife of the father and mother who's not a wife in the same pasuk, and imchahi can then modify something that's in the pasuk, which would be wife of the father. However, ervas avichahu cannot be modifying. In other words, the Gemara's kasha was, let that modify a case where it's his mother who's not the wife of the father. That's not mentioned in this pasuk, right? Because this pasuk is only talking about wife of the father, not actual mother. So ervas avicha, who has nothing to go on to negate it and say it's not that he can't be chayav for relations with his mother, as opposed to this pasuk has both categories in it. It has ervas avicha, which is wife of the father, and mother, and therefore imchahi can come and modify ervas avicha. So that's why we're not worried that we darshan imchahi but don't darshan ervas avichahu. So that's the answer to the Gemara's first question. The Gemara's second question was, if you're right that imchahi is such a good drasha, then the Rabbanon should also make the same drasha, and if they're going to make the same drasha, then they should produce the same result as Rabbi Yehuda, where imchahi modifies ervas avicha to say that he's only chayav for his mother, but not for his father's wife. The Gemara is going to say, no, we're not worried about that, because this whole thing is based on Rabbi Yehuda's understanding of ervas avicha, which we're going to learn is Gzeir Shava. That Rabbi Yehuda's understanding is that ervas avicha actually refers to wife of his father, and that's why imchahi can modify it. But according to the Rabbanon, the pasuk ervas avicha is actually according to the Rabbanon coming to tell us that he shouldn't have relationship with his father. That he shouldn't have mishkav zachor with his father. It has nothing to do with wife of the husband. So therefore, according to that, if you only have ervas imcha lo segala, which is talking about his mother, so then imcha he has nothing to go on where it's talking about the wife of the father to negate it. So that's why it doesn't work to the Rabbanon. So we've now answered, we're not worried about ervas avichahu because it has nothing to modify. Only imcha he has something to modify. And we're not worried that Chazal should make the same drasha as Rabbi Yehuda from imchahi, because they disagree fundamentally about what the beginning of the pasuk is talking about. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's talking about the wife of the father, Rabbanan hold it's talking about having relations with the father. Okay, so that is the answer for how Rabbi Yehuda knows it. Now, we referenced Rabbi Yehuda making Gzeir Shava. The Gemara is going to bring a brisa that supports Rava's answer. And we're going to get into this whole thing in a little bit more detail. And it's technical, that's why we're doing the visual aid today. We'll see if this works. Okay, so, top of Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Tanya Kavasi de Rava. We learned a brisa in accordance with Rava, what Rava was explaining that the main chiddush of Rava was that Rabbi Yehuda learns ervas avicha to include the wife of the husband. Now, Rashi points out, how do you know that this brisa you're going to bring is in fact the view of Rabbi Yehuda? Because the brisa we're going to bring is from Safra, and we know that Stam Safra Rabbi Yehuda, that anytime the Gemara brings a Safra, anytime that you have a plain Safra, that's Rabbi Yehuda. So we know this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and we're going to bring from Safra, we're going to see that Rabbi Yehuda in fact holds like Rava just said and how he darshans his pasuk. So here we go. Ish prat lekatan. So it's talking about someone who the ish asher yishkav es eshes aviv. Right? That's the pasuk we're going to darshan. We say as follows: Ish prat lekatan, to tell you that if a katan has relations with the wife of his father, he's not chayav. Asher yishkav es eshes aviv. So he says who has relations with the wife of his father. Mashma bein eshes aviv shehi imo ubein eshes aviv shelo imo. Right? So this is telling you that relations with the wife of his father, whether it's his mother or not, is in, now we're talking about, the end of the pasuk is written, Mos Yimsu Shneim D'meim Bam. So what are we talking about? It's telling you the punishment. So we know every Avera in the Torah, we need the Onish and the Azhara. We need both the punishment and the warning. So the punishment we're going to deal with first. Isha Sheyishkav Eshes Aviv tells you wife of father, whether his mother or not, is an Onish, he's going to get killed. Now the pasuk continues. Imo She'eno Eshes Aviv. What about his mother who's not married to his father, i.e. he was born out of wedlock? That's covered. Minayin. Where do we know that from? Talmud Lomar Ervas Aviv Gila. So he says, I'm going to learn it from this pasuk, Ervas Aviv Gila, that he exposed the erva of his father. Now, that does not in any way apply to a woman who is not married to his father. Why? Because a woman who's not married to his father is not considered Ervas Aviv. It's not considered the erva of his father. So how does he learn it? He's saying, Mufne lahakish v'lodon mimenu gzer shava. That therefore these words, what do you need these words? Isha shar yiskav eshes aviv should be enough. Why do you need to say ervas aviv gila? It must be coming based on the gzer shava that we're going to learn shortly to tell you that not only is he chayav for wife of his father, but also chayav for his mother who is not married to his father. And then the Gemara is going to continue darshan in the pasuk, most yumsu, that they'll surely die, beskila, that this is with stoning. Now the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, well, how do I know it's stoning? Now we should know this from yesterday, what the Gemara is about to say. The Gemara says, Nemer kan d'meim bam, v'nemer ba'ovi yadoni d'meim bam, that we know that it says here, the pasuk continues, most yumsu shnehem d'meim bam, and we know that the pasuk by ovi yadoni, which explicitly says that when you have someone who serves ovi yadoni, or does ovi yadoni, that communes with the dead, that person, it says that you stone them. So just like by Ovi Yadoni you stone, so here also you stone. And we had this yesterday when we were talking about Reb Zera and Ravina, that the limud of Ovi Yadoni is from the words D'meim Bam. Okay, so that's where we are. Malahal Beskila, Nafkam Beskila, so that tells you that this is Skila. Okay, so the Gemara says, fine. So we now have Onish Shamanu, we've heard this, Azhara Minayim. Where do we know the Azhara? So the Onish, wife of father, whether his mother or not, mother, whether wife of father or not. Okay. Talmud Lomer. So now how do we know the Azhara? Talmud Lomer. Ervas avicha lo segala. That the erva of the father you should not uncover. Ervas avicha zu eshes avicha. So he says, this is talking about the wife of the father. So right here, by the way, is where we're going to know that this brisa is Reb Yehuda, because what did we say just now in Amud Beis, Rava's answer? The chiddush of Rava's understanding of Reb Yehuda is that he understands these words, Ervas Avicha, to mean the wife of the father, not talking about having relations, Mishkav Zachar, with his father. So therefore, this is the proof, by the way, that Reb Yehuda, with this whole purpose we're bringing this brisa, is because we want to show, like Rava, that Reb Yehuda darshans these words, Ervas Avicha, to mean the wife of the husband. So the brisa says, Ervas Avicha lo segala, Ervas Avicha zu eshes Avicha. This is a reference to wife of the father. So the Gemara says, well, how do I know? So he says, well, how do I know that? Maybe it is a case of, that is talking about he should not have Mishkav Zachar with his father. So the Gemara says, no, because Nemer kan, Ervas Avicha lo segala, v'nemer lahalan, Ervas Aviv Gila. So he says that he's going to make as follows. Remember, we said these words were extra, we're going to make a Gzer Shava. We're going to see the Gzer Shava now. So he says as follows. It says, Ervas Imcha, Ervas Avicha lo segala, it says, Ervas Avicha lo segala, following like that. So he says, it says that there. We want to figure out, is that talking about a wife of the husband? He says, I'm going to make a Gzer Shava to Ervas Aviv Gila, this pasuk up here. Once I have that Gzer Shava, this pasuk is very clearly talking about someone who has relations with the wife of his father. So we say, just as here the pasuk is talking about wife of the father, so too here we're going to be talking Ervas Avicha lo segala is talking about wife of the father. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda knows his chiddush to darshan that Ervas Avicha is not talking about Mishkav Zachar with the father, but rather is talking about wife of the father. So Mala Halam Be'isha Sakasu Medaber, just like in this pasuk clearly it's talking about a marriage, Eshes Aviv. Therefore, here also it's talking about wife of the father. Umashma, and the fact that it says Ervas Avicha, it doesn't distinguish between whether it's his mother or not. Mashma bein Eshes Aviv shehi imo, bein Eshes Aviv she'eno imo. that regardless of whether or not it's his mother, if it's a wife of his father, then is chayav. Now continues the pasuk, continues the limud, imo she'eno eshes aviv minayin. How do I know if his mother bore him out of wedlock, meaning she was not married to the father? Talmud ervas imcha lo segala, that it says ervas imcha lo segala, is coming to tell you that even his mother, who was not married to the father. Okay? So he says, now the Gemara is going to have a little bit of a funny language, but basically what it's coming back to is saying as follows. Ainli elabaz harash asa kasav imo she'eno eshes aviv ki imo shehi eshes aviv. Onesh minayin. So he says as follows. Now this is really the Gzera Shava that we referenced earlier, but he's saying as follows, that I see in the Azhara, in the Pasuk of Azhara, that it compares his mother that is not the wife of his father to the mother who is the wife of the father, because you have both of them in the same Pasuk. But how do I know that at the Onesh level? So we say, Nemar kan ervas avicha lo segala. It's written here, ervas avicha lo segala. V'nemar lahalon, it's written up here, ervas aviv gilo. Ma bi'azhara asa kasav imo she'eno eshes aviv ki imo shehi eshes aviv. Just like in this pasuk, it compares when it's the wife of the father and it's the mother who is not married to him. So too, therefore, this pasuk also is talking about both, which tells you that both for purposes of onesh and for azhara, that the psukim, based on that Gzera Shava between Ervas Avicha, Lo Segala, and Ervas Aviv Gila, is coming to tell you that both of them, both the Onesh and Azhara, apply to wife of the father, as well as his mother, who's not the wife of the father. Okay? So therefore, Af Ba'onesh Asa Kasav Imo She'eno Eshes Aviv Ki Imo Shehi Eshes Aviv. So therefore, just like in Azhara, we have both wife of father and mother, so to here, by the Onesh, we have wife of father and mother. So now continues the Brisa, and this is the second aspect of what we're proving, Rava. The pasuk continues, Imchahi. What does Imchahi tell you? Mishum imo atamachayvo, vi atamachayvo mishum eshes of. That we're going to say that Imchahi comes to negate what we were learning from Ervas Avicha. From Ervas Avicha, we were learning wife of the father, whether it's his mother or not. And now we're saying Imchahi tells you, sorry, he's not chaya for wife of his father if it's also his mother. Right? So therefore, this is coming to tell you only wife of the father who's not his mother, and this is coming to tell you mother who's not the wife of the father. But if there would be only a case of mother, Imchahi negates the limud that Ervas Avicha, wife of the father, applies even when it's his mother, and therefore, if this negates that aspect of Ervas Avicha, what are we left with? We're left with that when a person has relations with his mother, who's also the wife of the father, that person is only chaya for Imchahi, because Imchahi took out of Ervas Avicha the liability for relations with his mother who's married to his father, Eshes Avicha. So that's how we're going to learn. Okay, so now we've completed the Brisa. What have we proven from this Brisa? On Amid Beis that we actually did this morning, Rava said that the reason Imchahi can modify this pasuk, but we're not worried about Ervas Avichahu, is because Imchahi negates half of what we learned from Ervas Avicha, and to say that Imchahi tells you he's only chayav for relations with his mother, who's the wife of his father, he's only chayav for the mother part because of the words Imchahi. So we've now seen a brisa that very clearly says exactly the way Rava explained Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now we have to figure out some things that are missing. V'Rabbanan Ervas Avicha, V'Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do with this pasuk of Ervas Avicha? So we had Ervas Avicha, which should come to tell us, Ervas Avicha, which is modified by Imchahi, should come to tell you that you're chayav only on relations with the mother, but not for the wife of his father, when he has relations with his mother, who is the wife of his father. Why don't the Rabbanan learn like that? So the Rabbanan say very simple why I don't learn like that, because I don't believe that Ervas Avicha is talking about relations with the wife of the father. I think Ervas Avicha is talking about having relations with your father. So that's what it says. Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan say? They say Ervas Avicha mamish. So the Gemara says, well, if you're coming to tell me that the pasuk is coming to tell you that you can't have relations with your father, what do I need this pasuk for? Hai meve as zachar nafka. So l'chayev. He says the pasuk says v'as zachar lo sishkav mishkavei isha, that a person should not have homosexual relations. So what do I need it to tell me that I shouldn't have relations with my father? I'm not having relations with any man. So the Gemara says, l'chayev olav shtayim, to make him chayev for 2. And what does that mean? We learned yesterday that obviously, if we're talking about killing him, he gets killed for even 1. What's the point of 2? Is to say that if somehow he did it by accident, and by accident doesn't mean fully by accident, it means for whatever reason he thought it was permitted, that he has to bring 2 chatas offerings. Uchud Rabbi Yehuda, this is similar like we learned like Rabbi Yehuda, which is different than Rabbi Yehuda, who we've been dealing with, is Rabbi Yehuda. Dam Rabbi Yehuda, Nachri Habala Aviv Chayev Shtayim. That it says a Nachri, now we're going to see in the Gemara in a moment that this does not mean really a Nachri, it means a Jew. It says a Jew who comes on his father is Chayev Shtayim. What are the 2? He's Chayev for Ervas Avicha Lo Segala, that you shouldn't have relations with your father, and he's Chayev for V'yat Zachar Lo Sishkav Mishkav Isha, that you shouldn't have Mishkav Zachar, so he's Chayev 2. Similarly, Habal Achi Aviv Chayev Shtayim, that someone who has relations, who has homosexual relations with his uncle, is also Chayev Shtayim. Why? Because how do we know? Because the pasuk says, it says, Ervas Avicha Lo Segala, I'm sorry, Rashi brought the pasuk, but basically the pasuk says that someone cannot uncover the erva. Oh, okay, there's ervas achi avicha lo segala. So the pasuk says that the erva of the brother of your father you should not uncover. Now you might say, so you might say that is maybe that's talking about his wife and not about having relations with the uncle himself. So we say no, because at the end of the pasuk it says his wife expressly. So therefore, in the beginning when it says achi avicha, it must be talking about not having homosexual relations with him. So what do you see? Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you're chayev 2, right? So if you're chayev 2, that if you're chayev 2, it must be one because of Ervas Avicha or Ervas Achi Avicha, and the other because of the general prohibition on homosexuality. Okay. So Amar Rava says, Mistabra Milsa de Rabbi Yehuda B'Yisrael B'Shogeg U'B'Karbon. So he says, what we're focused on right now is, why does it say Nachri? If you tell me it's a Jew, and we're talking about where he did it by accident, meaning he didn't realize that he was doing something wrong, and we're talking about karbanos, so then it's significant to understand why he would be chayav twice. But if we're talking v'haydekamer nachri, and then why would it say nachri lishna malihi? So that makes sense. But the isal kadaita. But if you would think that nachri mamish, so if you think that it's literally saying that a guy is chayav double misa. Dino mai nihu. What's the halacha of a guy who has homosexual relations? Katla, he gets killed. Betray katli katlaslay. Are you going to kill him twice? It doesn't make sense. So if you're talking about being over on two death penalties, it's only relevant to talking about a Jew who did it without realizing he did it, so we're not actually killing him, and now he has to bring a carbon, so he has to bring 2 carbonas because he was over on 2 lavim. So what do you see? You see that literally that the Rabbanan explain ervas avicha to mean a prohibition literally on having relations, a man to have relations with his father, and that's why we know he's chayav twice, once for ervas avicha and once for the regular prohibition on mishkav zachar. Okay. So the Gemara says, Tanya Nami Hachi, so we learned another brisa that said similar to this, Habal Aviv Chayev Shtayim, Habal Achi Aviv Chayev Shtayim. That someone who comes, has relations with his father, a man has relations with his father is Chayev 2 lavim, and similarly, someone has relations with his uncle is Chayev twice. Okay, so now the question would be, on its face, this would seem to negate, Ika de Amri, the Lo Rabbi Yehuda. So some say that this brisa, that talks about him being chayav twice is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because remember, Rabbi Yehuda learned that ervas avicha is talking about wife of his father, is not talking about homosexual relations with his father. So therefore, the only thing that Rabbi Yehuda has, if someone has relations with his father, is the general prohibition on mishkav zachar. It does not have this pasuk. So when the brisa says that he's chayav twice, it has to be the Rabbanan and not Rabbi Yehuda. That's one version. The Ika the Amri, there are others who said, Afilu Teim Rabbi Yehuda. You could even say that price is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda would agree that when a person has relations with his father, he's over on 2 lavim and he needs 2 chatas offerings. Why? How would he bring it? Umaisi lava kavachomer me'achi aviv. He's going to say, I'm going to bring you a kavachomer that when someone has relations with his father, he's over on 2 isurei misa. Why? Because Uma Achi Aviv the Kurvei da Aviv Hu Chayev Shtayim Aviv Lo Kol Shekin. So he says, what's the Kavachomer? He says as follows. We have a pasuk that says you can't have Mishkav Zachar with your father's brother, right? What's his relationship to his father's brother? It's through his father, right? So if his uncle, if he's Chayev for relations with his uncle, he surely should be Chayev for relations with his father. So therefore you have a Kavachomer that from the uncle, that the father also has a Chiyuv Misa, and then you add on top of that the general prohibition on Mishkav Zachar, and you end up with two sources for Chiyuv Misa, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who does not understand Eretz Avicha to be talking about relations with his father. Okay, so we have one group who says that in fact this brisa that says you're over on 2 is not like Rabbi Yehuda because it can't use Eretz Avicha to talk about relations with his father, and the other brisa says no, even Rabbi Yehuda could agree that someone who has relations with his father is over on 2 because we have a Kavul Chomer. What are they arguing about? They're arguing about the Machlokes of Abaye Rava, which we're going to see later on in Sanhedrin. Mar Savar Onshim Nadin. Umar Savar Ein Onshim Nadin. So he says that one of them holds that you can punish someone using a logical argument like a Kavul Chomer, and the other holds you can't. So if you understand that you can make a Kavul Chomer to punish someone and make him Chayev Achatos, so then it's fine, because Rabbi Yehuda can agree that he's over on 2 lavim for his father, one because of the general prohibition on Mishkav Zachar, and one from the Kavul Chomer from his uncle. But if you understand that you cannot make a Kavul Chomer to be Mechayiv someone Misa, so then you no longer have the Kavul Chomer, and you don't have the Pasuk Ervas Avicha to tell you relations with the father, so all you're left with is a general prohibition on Mishkav Zachar, and then therefore the brisa that says that you're a Chayiv on 2 must be like the Rabbanan and not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda would say Eretz Avicha is used up for talking about wife of the father. Okay, Rabbanan Azhara Leishes Aviv Minaluhu. So where do the Rabbanan learn the Azhara from Eshes Aviv? Because remember what happened here is this pasuk, which is the Azhara pasuk, is the pasuk that teaches you about relations with your father's wife or the mother. He learns Eretz Avicha is talking about Mishkav Zachar, right? So that's what the Rabbanan learned. So then therefore, Ervas Imcha, mother who's not married to the father, but how do you know where is the Azhara for the wife of the father? So the Gemara says, Nafkilu me Ervas Eishes Avicha lo Segala. We have this other pasuk down here, Yud Ches Ches, which says Ervas Eishes Avicha lo Segala, tells you that that's the Azhara, according to the Rabbanan, to tell you that a man cannot have relations with the wife of his father, even if it's not his mother. Okay, so we say, Rabbi Yehuda, why does Rabbi Yehuda have to learn it from Ervas Avicha? Why not? Why doesn't he learn it from a very explicit pasuk, Yud Ches Ches, which says Ervas Eishes Avicha lo Segala? So the Gemara says, he learns it, Ahu mi boile l'Azhara le'Eishes Aviv la'achar misa. He needs that pasuk to tell you that a person is chayav, which we actually saw in our mission yesterday, that if a man has relations with the wife of his father, that applies even if his father dies. So if his father marries a woman who's not his mother, and then his father dies, he has relations with that woman, he's been over on the Isser of Eshes Aviv. That's how Rabbi Yehuda would use this pasuk. Okay, so the Gemara says, Rabbanan, where would the Rabbanan know the halacha in our Mishnah that a man is chayav for relations with his wife's father even after his father died? So the Gemara says, Hahu miseifa dekra nafka ervas avichahi. So the end of the pasuk says Ervas Eishes Avicha lo Segala ervas avichahu. Those words are extra, and so therefore that's what the Rabbanan used to learn that a man is chayav for relations with his wife's father even after his father is no longer living. Rabbi Yehuda, what about Rabbi Yehuda? What does he do with those words Ervas avichahu? Mi boile mishum Eshes av atam chayv v'yatam chayv mishum Eshes ish. So he says he's coming to teach you that these words, Ervas Avichahu, comes to tell you that when a person has relations with the wife of his father, who's married to his father still, that he's only chayav for relations with the wife of the father. He's not chayav for the general prohibition on Eshes Ish. That's what Rabbi Yehuda learns from the words Ervas Avichahu. Now, hopefully someone will ask a question. maybe, that yesterday's Mishnah we said expressly not like that. V'ha'nan tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, Habal Eishes Av, someone who comes who has relations with the wife of his father, Chayav alei mishum Eishes Av, u'mishum Eishes Ish. That the person is chayav both for Eishes Av and for Eishes Ish, bein b'chayav, bein lachar misas, aviv, whether the father's living or not. And what happens? This is an uncontested statement in the Mishnah. V'lo palag Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda never argued. So if Rabbi Yehuda learns from Eretz Avichahu that when a person has relations with the wife of his father, he's chayav only for wife of the father, but not for general prohibition on Eishes Ish, so then Rabbi Yehuda, who dashes that pasuk, should have argued on the Mishnah and said, hold on, you're only chayav for relations with the wife of the father. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, Polik v'Braiso. And Achanami, Rabbi Yehuda does argue, and it just happens to be in the Mishnah he didn't say it, but in a Brisa somewhere it must be that he says it. Okay. V'Rabbanan, okay, so we said that we talked about the fact that Rabbi Yehuda we talked about the fact that Rabbi Yehuda learns from Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala I'm sorry. So that was Azhara. So I'm sorry. So we have as follows, that we're talking now about the halacha of that whether the Eishes Aviv Lachar Misa, that if a man has relations with the wife of his father after he dies, so Rabbi Yehuda learned that from Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala, the Rabbanan learned it from Ervas Avichahu. So now the question here is, that's the Azhara, that's the warning, but remember we need a punishment also, so where do we learn the punishment? So now the Gemara says, Bishlam al Rabbi Yehuda Maisi Lo B'Gzer Shava. So Rabbi Yehuda, this is not a problem, because Rabbi Yehuda would learn the Azhara from Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala. How would he know the Onesh? Because remember, we had a Gzeir Shava that we compared Ervas Avicha Lo Segala to Ervas Aviv Gila to tell you that there's a Gzeir Shava between Onesh and Azhara, and if you know one, you know the other. So therefore, once Rabbi Yehuda knows Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala comes to tell you that there's an Azhara, there's a warning not to have relations with the wife of his father, so then the Gzeir Shava tells you that there's also an Onesh. But according to the Rabbanan, who A, didn't make that Gzeir Shava, and B, learning it from the words Ervas Avichahu, that's how they know Azhara. But how do they know Onesh? So we say, El Rabbanan Minalahu, where do they know it from? Amri Lecha, Hahu Ervas Aviv Gilo, the Mapik La Rabbi Yehuda Gzeir Shava, Mapgile Inhu La Onesh Eishes Aviv Lachar Misa. So he says as follows, that if you remember, that Rabbi Yehuda used these words, Ervas Aviv Gilo, which were extra, to connect a Gzeir Shava between Ervas Aviv Gila and Ervas Avicha Lo Segala, right? But and that was to teach a number of things. It was to teach that first of all that this pasuk is not talking about Mishkav Zachor with his father, but rather is talking about wife of the father, and it was also talking about the Gzeir Shava to show how you know the mother even without marriage. But that was only a Gzeir Shava according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbanan didn't darshan that to Gzeir Shava. So as Rabbi Yehuda pointed out, these words are extra. And the Rabbanan did not use it for Gzeir Shava. So we're saying, okay, these words, Ervas Aviv Gila, are extra, come to tell you the Onesh, the punishment, because remember this pasuk is again a punishment pasuk. It says, Mos Yumtu Shneim D'Meim Bam. So it's coming to tell you the Onesh for someone who has relations with the wife of his father, even after his father died, because these words are extra. Okay? Rabbanan, Onesh L'imo She'ena Eishes Aviv, Okay, so remember that we had, according to the Rabbanan, we had the Ervas Imcha Lo Segala was an Azhara that he shouldn't have relations with his mother who's not the wife of his father. And we have an Azhara of Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala that the wife of the, Ervas Imcha Lo Segala, which the Rabbanan understand to be an Azhara for his mother who's not married to his father. And then you have Ervas Eishes Avicha Lo Segala to tell you that there's an Azhara on the wife of the father, right? So we have Azhara for both mother and wife of father. But Onesh, remember, we only know Isha Asher Yishkav as Eishes Aviv, which tells you wife of the father. But how do we know an Onesh for mother who is not married to the father? So Amr of Shisha Breder Idai. Now remember, by the way, we reference of Shisha Breder Vidi. I told you we were going to learn it today. That's this. Amr Kra, the pasuk says Imchahi. The pasuk says it is his mother. Asa Kasav Imo She'enesh Eishes Aviv Ki Imo She'hi Eishes Aviv. So he says as follows, that we have Ervas Imcha Lo Segala, which is talking about his mother, and then the pasuk needlessly says Imchahi, it's his mother. So that comes to tell you it's his mother no matter what, whether his mother was married to his father, wasn't married to his father. So that's how they learn Onesh for the case of the mother who's not married to the father. That's how the Rabbanan learn it from Imchahi. Okay, so now we're finished with our chart. A little complicated. Okay, Haba al Kalaso. So someone who has relations with his daughter-in-law. So the Gemara says, "V'lechayev nami misham eishes beno." So what is the pasuk that says by son-in-law? It says. The pasuk says, "Ervas kaloscha lo segala." The erva of your daughter-in-law you should not uncover. Eishes bincha hi lo segala ervasa. It's the wife of your son. You should not uncover her erva. So what do you see? You see two things. The pasuk is telling you. It's repeating itself. But one says ervas kaloscha lo segala, and then the other one says eishes bincha hi lo segala. It implies that there's two lavim that someone is over when they have relations with his daughter-in-law. So the Gemara says as follows: "V'lechayev nami misham eishes beno." Why did you tell me in the Mishnah that he's chayav for two lavin? One for his daughter-in-law and one for having relations with a married woman. It should be one for married woman, one for his daughter-in-law, and another for his daughter-in-law, because there's two things in the pasuk that imply there's two lavin for the daughter-in-law. Rabbiya Pesach HaKatsav beKalaso v'siyam be'eshes beno lo melecha zuhi kalaso zuhi eshes beno. He says no. You're figuring out that it's two psukim when it says ervas kalascha lo segala eshes bincha hi lo segala ervasa. You're saying that's two psukim. It's not really two psukim. It's the same person. It's both talking about the daughter-in-law, and therefore there's only one lav of the daughter-in-law and one lav of eshes ish, which is what our Mishnah told us. So you might ask, well, if so, why does the pasuk repeat it twice? So they say, Rashi points out that this is in order to be machayev him even achar misa. It says twice his daughter-in-law, once for his daughter-in-law when his son is still alive, and once for his daughter-in-law even after the son dies. But it's at the end of the day still only one lav. Okay, and that's why our Mishnah said he's over on two lavim, one for daughter-in-law and one the general prohibition on eshes ish. Okay, Mishnah habala zachar v'al behema v'isha meviyas habehema. Beskila. We said in the Mishnah before, we had 18 cases. This is the first 3 of them. Someone who has a relationship, who engages affirmatively in an act, a homosexual act, and al behema, someone who engages in bestiality, and a woman who engages in bestiality by bringing a behema on her. All of those get beskila. Now the Gemara asks a question. The Mishnah, im adam chata behema machato. He says, now we know the halacha is, the Torah tells us that if someone has relations with a behema, not only does he get killed, but the animal get killed. So the Mishnah inquires about this. This is an interesting halacha. He said, what did the animal do wrong? I get it. The man did a chet. What did the behema do? We're going to see what this means in the Gemara, but it says, since this animal brought a person to takala, to sin, therefore the pasuk says it should be stoned. We'll see in the Gemara what that means. Davar acher, another possibility. Shlota he behema overes b'shuk v'yomru zu hi shenisko ploni al yada. We don't want it to be that people see Bessie the cow walking around and people say, oh, Bessie, that's the one who Reuven whatever had relations with. So again, we'll see in the Gemara why what these two answers are about. But that's the reason the animal gets killed. Okay, so the Gemara says, Zachar minala, and how do I know that someone is chayav skila for mishkav zachar? The Tanur Rabbanim, because the pasuk says the Brisa darshans the pasuk ish, so it says prat katan. That's saying it's talking about a man but not a katan. Asher yishkav zachar, who has relations with a zachar, ben gadol ben katan. So it's saying that if someone has relations with a katan, so someone if someone sodomizes a 10-year-old, that he's chayav even though the recipient of his act was a katan. Conversely, if the katan was 10 years old and had relations had mishkav zachar with a 30-year-old, so then the 30-year-old is chayav even though the person who was performing the act was a katan. So we see that applies at some level, and we'll get into a little more clarification on detail, hopefully, if we get to the end of the daf. Okay, Mishkavei Isha, the pasuk continues, Mishkavei Isha, which implies plural forms of relationship similar to a woman. So we say as follows, that it's not coming to teach us anything about Mishkav Zachar, it's coming to teach us about relations with a woman. As follows, because since it says Mishkavei Isha plural, comes to tell you that if a man has relations, let's say with his sister, anyone he's not permitted to, it's coming to tell you that not only is that true if he has ordinary relations with his sister, but even if he has even if he has anal intercourse with his sister, that would also be a violation of the erva, and he would be chayav misa. So Rabbi Shmuel, hareza bala lamed v'nimsa lamed. He says, interestingly, this you would think was coming to tell you a halacha of mishkav zachar, but actually it's coming to teach you from mishkav zachar that it says mishkav isha, and it equates the two forms of intercourse with a woman with a woman comes to tell you that therefore any case that relations with a woman is impermissible. That's true whether it's in the natural or unnatural way. Okay. Most yumsu, the pasuk continues, they shall surely die b'skila, with stoning. The Gemara says, how do you know it's skila when it says they should die? Maybe it means sreifa or hereg or chenek. So the Gemara says, never kan demand ba, never ba v'yadoni demand ba. So we've had this before, that since here by Mishkav Zachar and by Ovi Yadoni it says demand ba, malahal b'skila and afkam b'skila, just like in the case of Ovi Yadoni, it's clear that it's skila. So too here in Mishkav Zachar, it's clear that it is skila. Okay, so the Gemara says fine. So now I have a pasuk that teaches us that people who engage in Mishkav Zachar get killed. So that's the onesh. Onesh shamanu azhar minayin. How do I know that you're not supposed to have, that you have to be warned in the Torah to tell you that you're not allowed to have Mishkav Zachar? Tamulamar v'at Zachar lo tishkav Mishkav Isha toevahu he. So we say, the pasuk says, you should not have, it's another pasuk that says you shouldn't have homosexual relations. It's a toeva. Lamadnu azhara, lamadnu azhara l'sholchev, azhara l'nishkav minayin. So he says as follows. So what have we proven so far? We had an onesh, which talked about both of them, right? So both the person, it says that two people should not have it, the mei and bum, both of them are chayav misa. So the onesh we know is true both for the performer, the actor, and the recipient of the Mishkav Zachar. But in the case of Azhara, we learned it from the pasuk which says, "As Zachar lo sishkav Mishkav Isha," you should not engage in homosexual relations with a man. That's talking about an actor. But how do we know that the recipient has an Azhara? Okay, Azhara lo nishkav b'nayin Talmud lo yia kadosh mi bnei Yisrael. The pasuk says in Devarim that there should not be a kadosh mi bnei Yisrael. V'omer, and we have a pasuk in Malachim Aleph which says, the Gam Kadesh Hi Ba'aretz, the Gam Kadesh Hi Ba'aretz, there was Kadesh in the land, Asu Kechola Toevas HaGoyim Asher Horish, that you did like all of the Toevas of the Goyim that the Rabbanu Shalom kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. So what do you see? So you see that it says the words Kadesh in Malachim Aleph by dealing with Toevos, right? And we know that one of the Toevos that's dealt with in the Torah is Mishkav Zachar. And so once we know that when it talks about Kadesh being done in Eretz Yisrael, it includes Mishkav Zachar, then when the pasuk in Devarim says, Lo yia Kadesh mi bnei Yisrael, that there shouldn't be a Kadesh, it's coming to tell you that there should not be Mishkav Zachar. So you see that it is a Azhara. How do you know that it's for the recipient? Because since we see by the Onesh that it's true whether the person gets punished, whether they're the actor or the recipient, so too here in this Azhara, it applies when it says Kadesh, Lo yia Kadesh, it's saying even the recipient. Okay, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, these words are Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, Eino tzarech, I don't need to come onto this whole Lo yia Kadesh business. Why? Because Hareyu Omer, it's written in the pasuk, we brought the Azhara, which we understood to be talking about only the actor, because it says, V'yazachar lo sishkav mishkav isha, he says, V'yazachar lo sishkav mishkav isha, kri beit lo sishachev. He says that pasuk that says you should not engage in acts of mishkav zachar can be read lo sishkav, you should not be the actor, or lo sishachev, you should not have the act done upon you. So the same pasuk can teach us both cases, actor and recipient, for purposes of an azhara. Behema minallah, and how do I know that a person gets skila for relations with a behemoth? The Tanur Rabbanan, because the Rabbanan learned ish. It says a man prat lekatan, to tell you that if a katan has relations with a behemoth, he's not chayiv misa. The pasuk continues, Asher yiten shechivta bebehema, that he so he says that he puts that he engages in relations with the behemoth, ben gedola ben katana, whether the animal is old, young, it doesn't matter. We're going to get into this because by people there's a distinction, but by animals there's no distinction. The animal could be 1 hour old and you're chayav for doing it. It could be 50 years old and you're chayav for doing it. Okay? Most you must, the pasuk continues, you should surely be killed. We say beskila. Atomer beskilo, same question we've had a bunch of times. So it says, how do you know it's skila? Maybe it's streifa herek v'chenek. The Gemara says, Nemar Khan, it's written here, taharogu. V'nemar, so it's written in our pasuk, taharogu. V'nemar lahalan ki harag tehargenu, that we have a pasuk later, that's written in Dvarim Yud Gimel, which I think was talking about, I don't remember, maybe talking by, Irani Dachas, I don't remember, but it says, Harag Taragenu, they should surely be killed. No, it's not, Irani Dachas, I don't remember, but the pasuk is talking about Skila, Malaham Beskila, Afkam Beskila, we learn from that, Gzer Shava. And, even though, that even though, that Tarogu, it says here, is technically speaking about the behema, we assume that the man and the behema get the same punishment. So you see that a person gets the punishment of skila who engages in relations with a behema. Lamanu onesh l'shochev, onesh l'nishkav minalan. So he says, okay, this pasuk that told us that the person dies is talking about that's talking about ish asher yiten shechivta b'behema, that puts his shchiva in the behema implies that he's the actor and that he gets killed. How do I know that a person who allows himself to be sodomized, a man who allows himself to be sodomized by an animal gets death? Tamalomer kol shochiv in behema mos yumos. So now the pasuk says any person who lies with the behema gets killed. Now technically this pasuk seems to imply it's someone who's the actor. We're looking for something of someone who's the recipient. But why is it relevant? Because since we've already established that the actor gets killed, so what do you need this pasuk kol shochiv in behema mos yumas? We already learned it from Isha Shayiten Shechivza Behema. So the Gemara says, therefore it's an extra pasuk telling us that he gets killed. So that if we have this concept that if you don't need it for a person who's the actor, then we'll use it instead for the person who's the recipient. Lamadnu onesh bein l'shochav bein l'nishkav. He says, okay, fine, I accept that drasha. So we've learned the onesh, that there's a punishment whether the person is the one performing the mishkav zachar or the one who's the recipient of the mishkav zachar. Azhara minayin. How do I know azhara? Tamalomar uv'chol behema lo siten shechavta l'chalatama ba. Okay, so it says that in any animal you shouldn't put the shechava l'tama ba lamanu azhara l'shochev. I'm sorry. So he says that is the azhara. It says that you should not have relations with a behema l'tama ba. So that's the azhara for. So we see the warning that a person should not be the actor. L'nishkav minayin. How do I know that he shouldn't be the recipient? So we've now established onish for both actor and recipient, and we've established azhara warning for the actor. How do I know for the recipient? Tamalomer lo yiyah kadesh mi bnei Yisrael. V'gam kadesh hayabaretz. So same drasha we had before, that when it says lo yiyah kadesh, it's reference to things that are toeva. Before we used it for mishkav zachar, now we're using it for mishkav behema because that's also considered a toeva. And once it's a toeva, it's covered under v'gam kadesh hibaretz, which then translates back to lo yiyah kadesh is a form of azhara. So Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, these are Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva, much like he did before, Rabbi Akiva Amar says, Eino tzarech. Hareyu Amar lo siten shechavtecha, which we said was the actor. He says, the fact that the Torah picks a funny way to say it, you could also read it or understand it, lo siten shchiva seich, to tell you that you should not be a recipient either. Okay? So now we have both the azhara for the actor and the recipient, and we have the onish for the actor and recipient for behema. So now we're going to say as follows: Habal zachar ve'hevi alav zachar. Someone somehow both performed mishkav zachar and received mishkav zachar by accident somehow, or without realizing it was wrong. Amar Ravo l'divrei Rabbi Shmuel chayiv shtayim. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, he's over on two things, that he needs to bring two chatos. Why? Chada milot tishkav, because one is the pasuk that says that lo tishkav, which tells you that is that he should not have relations where he's the actor. V'chadam lo yiyah kadesh, because lo yiyah kadesh was where we learned that he should not be the recipient. Right? So according to Rabbi Shmuel, it works well. He has to bring two carbon chatases because we had one pasuk that tells us he shouldn't be the actor, and one pasuk that he shouldn't be the recipient. Because lo sishka v'lo shishachev chadahi. Because according to Rabbi Akiva, the isser of being an actor and a recipient both come from the pasuk. It's just read two different ways, lo sishkav or lo sishachev. But that's still at the end of the day only one lav. So therefore, this is a nafkamina between how Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva learned it lemaisa, which would be is that if in the same period of unawareness that it was asur, he both performed and had performed on him an act of homosexuality, according to Rabbi Shmuel, there are two separate lavim implicated here, and therefore we bring two chatos. And according to Rabbi Akiva, even though he holds both are asur, he brings it from the same lav. Okay, similarly, someone somehow without realizing that it was asur, both had engaged in relations with a behema and had a behema engaged in relations with him. Amr Bavo, l'divrei Rabbi Shmuel chayav shtayim. So he says, Rabbi Avo says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, he's chayav 2. Why? One, because it says lo siten shechavtecha, v'chadami lo yeh kadesh. So one that said he shouldn't be the actor, and one that said with a behemo, and one that said that he shouldn't be a toeva, that he's the recipient. L'divrei Rabbi Akiva ein chayav ela achas. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he would only be chayav 1 because why? Rabbi Akiva learns both actor and recipient by mishkav zachar, by mishkav behema from the same pasuk lo siten shechavtecha, and then we darshan the v'shchiva seich. But they're both coming from one pasuk, so therefore there's only one lav. Chadahi, that's one lav. Okay. Abaya Amar. Abaya argues on Rabbi Avo. Abaya says no. Afilu divrei Rabbi Shmuel nami ein chayav ela achas. According to Rabbi Shmuel, he's also only chayav 1. Why? Because why did he think he was chayav 2? Because 1, lo sitein shechavtecha. Number 2, because lo yeh kadesh. But he says, Abaya argues, he says, the chiksiv lo yeh kadesh begavri ksiv. He says that pasuk lo yeh kadesh is, when it talked about a toeva, it was speaking specifically about a toeva of mishkav zachar. So therefore, he doesn't have a problem with saying that Rabbi Shmuel holds there's 2 in the case of mishkav zachar, but mishkav behema he has a problem because he says lo siyah kadesh is not talking about mishkav behema, it's only talking about mishkav zachar. So we say, okay, so then according to Abaya, if you're saying that lo yeh kadesh can't be talking about mishkav behema, we just use that pasuk to be our source for an azhara on a recipient of mishkav behema. So Elul Rabbi Shmuel azhara l'nishkav minalei. How would he know it? Because we've just knocked out using lo siyah kadesh from telling us an azhara for the recipient of an bestiality. So Gemara says nafkale, he learns it out mikol shochev even behema mos yumas, that it says that if someone lies with the behema, he should surely die. Now that's an extra pasuk. We had this already, right? So we had before. This is how we learned the onesh. This is how we learned the azhara on someone who is the recipient. Because we said the pasuk, we have an extra pasuk written by onesh. Since we don't need it by onesh, we'll use it for azhara. But the Gemara wants to know, at the end of the day, if you were trying to teach azhara, why would the Torah put it in the language? If you were trying to teach the recipient, why would the Torah put it in the language of the actor? So it's the Gemara says, "Afki Rachman nishka b'lashon shochev," and it chose to do that to tell you ma shochev anish v'hizir, af nishka anish v'hizir. So he says, how do I know that a person has an azhara, a warning not to be a recipient? Is because since the way I knew azhara of an actor was because the pasuk had an extra pasuk written by actor, and the way I knew azhara by recipient is because there was an extra pasuk written by actor. If it doesn't apply to actor, let it apply to recipient. So now how do I know azhara of the recipient? That's how I knew the azhara of the actor. How do I know azhara of the recipient? Is because why did the Torah at the end of the day, if it wanted to tell you the azhara of the actor as opposed to the onish, of the actor, so you should have said it by azhara. Why are you telling it to me by onish? It's coming to tell you that there's a comparison between a shochev and a nishkav, and therefore he's warned even by a recipient. I'm sorry, I didn't say that very well, but at the end I think that is the correct thing. Okay, so the Gemara says, ma shochev onish v'hizir, af nishkav onish v'hizir. Okay, so now we're going to talk about someone who had a little bit of a bad day. Hanirva l'zachar, v'hanirva l'behema. So if someone got sodomized by both a man and a behema, I'm sorry, this is someone who did this. Okay, so he says he's chayav for 2. One, because it says lo sishkav mishkav behema, and the other because it says lo siten shechav to rabo. L'divrei Rabbi Shmuel, but according to Rabbi Shmuel, eino chayav ala achas. Because why? Because how did he learn the recipient? According to Rabbi Shmuel, the recipient at the end of the day is idi lo yeh kadeshu. That either that the way we learned out is that according to Rabbi Shmuel, that someone who is the recipient of Mishkav Zachar is from Leah Kadesh, and according to Rabbi Shmuel, in the view of Rabbi Avohu, that the source for someone who is the recipient of a behema is also Leah Kadesh. So therefore, we'd only be chayav one. Abaya says, Afilu de Rabbi Shmuel nami chayav shtayim. Abaya says, now if you remember, before Abaya argued and said a recipient who's the recipient of Mishka Behema cannot be learned from Lo Yeh Kadesh, because Lo Yeh Kadesh cannot be referring to an animal, it only refers to a man. So he therefore learned it out from so therefore Abaya is consistent when he says Rabbi Shmuel, you're also chayav too, because they don't dechsiv kol shochiv in behema most yumas imeno inyan l'shochiv tenei inyan nishkav va'afkir rachmana l'nishkav b'loshen shochiv ma shochiv anish v'hizer af nishkav anish v'hizer. So that limud that Abaya just learned. So Abaya is saying, according to me, Rabbi Shmuel learns from two different psukim the recipient of Mishkav Zachar and Mishkav Behema, and so therefore he is chayav for two chayve chatos. Now here's someone who really had an interesting day. Habal Zachar, Vehevi Zachar love. He both he was the actor in Mishkav Zachar and the recipient of Mishkav Zachar, and Habal Behema Vehevi Behema love, and he was also the actor in bestiality and the recipient in bestiality. So you had all four going on. So Bein l'Rebavo, Bein l'Abaya, that whether you say like Rabbi Avo or you say like Abaya, Rabbi Shmuel chayav shalosh, Rabbi Akiva chayav shtayim. Why? All right, so it's as follows. So remember, so he did all four things. He was the actor for Mishkav Zachar and Mishkav Behema. He was the recipient for Mishkav Zachar and Mishkav Behema. So according to Rabbi, so how do we know actor? One is as Zachar lo sishkav. That's one lav. That's an actor by Zachar. How do we know the actor by Behema? It says v'chol Behema lo siten shechavtecha. That's two lavim. Then, when he's the recipient, according to Rabbi Shmuel, he knows Zachar from Lo Yeh Kadesh, so that is three, right? And then Rabbi Avohu, according to Rabbi Avohu, he learns out the recipient of Behema also from Lo Yeh Kadesh. But therefore, you don't get a fourth because you can't use Lo Yeh Kadesh a second time. So therefore, according to Rabbi Avohu, it's three. Now, according to Abaye, you also have only three, because you have as Zachar lo sishkav tells you as Zachar is the actor. Behema lo siten shechavtecha tells you actor by Behema. Lo Yeh Kadesh tells you a recipient by Zachar. But where did Abaya learn the recipient by Behema? He learned it from Uvachol Behema lo siten shechavtecha, which is the same source for where he learned an actor by Behema. So he also only had three. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he's only chayav for two, because why? Rabbi Akiva held in both the case of Zachar and Behema, you learn from the pasuk just how you read it. Lo sishkav, lo sishachev, and similarly by Behema, it's a v'chol Behema lo siten shechavtecha or shchiva seich. But at the end of the day, for all four issues, he only has two lavim. So Rabbi Akiva says you have two. All right, we'll have to stop here. Thank you.